Another record low for the dollar. We have been focusing on this, and one of the first to highlight the dollar's reaction to the Fed, JP Morgan, Bear Stearns situation was Ashraf Laidi, chief currency analyst at CMC Markets in New York. Ashraf, good morning to you. I know you had a late evening along with many of us.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
All right, we've been talking about the dollar, and here is the question. How much lower will it go?
There's a lot of talk as whether we're going to see intervention. And I think, as we have seen last night, the only way to have any intervention is if it's going to be coordinated intervention. That is not only coordinated talk, and not only to saying that the current moves are excessive, but there has to be the ECB, the BOE, the Fed. They really have to come in and to do for the dollar what was done for the euro in 2000.
Ashraf, I know that you really are a currency guy, but you do have a call on the S&P 500. Let me stick to currencies, though, for a minute. You track the yen, and that's been an indicator in terms of risk appetite in the U.S. stock market. Tell me about that.
Yes, basically people use the yen, they sell the yen to buy risk, and one way to represent risk is to buy the S&P or to buy equities. Basically, rather than buying something, you want to get a bigger bang out of your buck, so you want to leverage that, and you want to use the low yield the yen. So when the yen drops, the S&P goes up, or the stock market goes up, and vice versa. And what is interesting is that this inverse correlation continues around 90%.
¿Cree que ese mercado laboral va a tocar fondo?
Bueno, no estamos en el medio de la recesión en Estados Unidos, en el sector de los empleos, Verónica, porque acabamos de ver 2 meses consecutivos de una pierda de empleos. El viernes próximo, no esta semana, vamos a ver los datos del empleo del mes de marzo. Esto va a darnos el tercer mes consecutivo con todas las informaciones, las noticias, los bancos, las compañías en Estados Unidos que están reduciendo el staff, los empleos. Será imposible de ver una creación de empleos en ese dato.
يعني ذكرت أننا بدورة حياة في عمر البطالة قد دائما 12 شهر 12 شهر بمستويات متدنية، والدولار سوف يعاني مع هذه
لماذا؟ لأنه يعني حكاية يعني كما قلتيها الوظائف البطالة ستؤثر عن دولار من ايش؟ من خلال البنك المركزي، انه ستجبر البنك المركزي ان يخفض اسعار المعدة. شوفي هلا اذا بنشوف حملة،
لكن بشكل قليل، هلا ما بقى نشوفها بشكل كتير، يعني 25
الآن ولكن أنا أتوقع إنه أسعار الفائدة في الولايات المتحدة يعني ستنتقل من 2.25% الآن إلى 1% في نهاية العام. يعني بس بدي أقول في حملة خفض أسعار الفائدة في 2001 و2002، في حملة خفض أسعار الفائدة من الولايات المتحدة في 2001 و2002
2% avant la fin du deuxième trimestre. Et je pense qu'à la fin de l'année, on peut voir 1,75. Mais la chose c'est, M. Trichet et la Banque Centrale Européenne, ils ne vont pas risquer à dire, à essayer de calmer cette hausse dans l'euro, parce qu'ils peuvent risquer une chute dans l'euro, et ils ont besoin d'un euro fort quand on voit le prix de pétrole à 110, parce que...
Okay, so you think if the Fed cuts again in December that this even accelerates here?
Yes, but not only that, Maria. We have to see the other part of the equation is that the rest of the world is not even considering about cutting interest rates. The Aussies, tomorrow, they're going to raise interest rate to 6.75%. The ECB may actually think about raising interest rates because inflation is at 2.6%, well below the 2% level that they needed to be. They cannot raise interest rates because of the credit crisis. So it's not only what's happening in the U.S., it's what's happening in the rest of the world. The central banks out there, they are considering raising interest rates further or keeping them unchanged. And this trend, as long as it continues, it's going to weigh on the U.S. dollar.
Ashraf, I don't know if you were watching yesterday. Your ears should have been ringing, though, because I got your 08 trade at the end of the program. You were mentioning it. Inspired us to talk about this today.
Let me bring in Ashraf Laidi to talk about the impact on the dollar. We've seen something in the first few minutes here, Ashraf, but how about long term?
Yes, this news actually, it is a substitute for the anticipated intermeeting rate cut. We know intermeeting rate cuts, or basically rate cuts, are bad for the dollar. This news comes in to flood liquidity and comes instead of the rate cut, so it is good for the US dollar. We're seeing the euro coming in from 154.90 to 154.20. However, this does not mean that the Fed is not expected to cut rates by 50 basis points.
Ashraf, does it reverse the long-term trade on the dollar?
Of course not. Oh, no. But this is a very short-term play. We saw the euro before those numbers went from 153.90 to 154.90. You know, I used to like the Australian dollar. I still like the Australian, but I think that the Swiss franc, Carol, the Swiss franc has around a 60% chance of reaching parity with the United States dollar.
The Aussie dollar is something I believe that links to your favorite trade.
Yes, the Aussie, you know, before the unwinding of the carry trade hit the Aussie and the rest of the other high-yielding currencies, the RBA, the Reserve Bank of Australia, was raising interest rates, and it was in the midst of raising interest rates towards 7%. It was interrupted by what was happening in the markets. But really, to get a big bang out of your buck here and to leverage your trade, you want to really go long the Aussie against a currency whose downward potential is great, and that is the UK. UK interest rates are at 5.5. We think they're going to go down all the way to 4.5%. The sterling, if you take away the dollar, it was the worst performing currency in the G10 in 2007. We think further losses should really be highlighted against the Aussie. I don't think Saudi Arabia is going to do the big move of breaking away from the peg. They may either revalue the rate from its current 3.75 reals to $1 and revalue it upward, let's say by 0.5%, and to a new peg like the Chinese did.